Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Matters of Faith, the radio show. Matters of Faith is a show designed to bring issues of interest to you, the listening and viewing audience, that will put a biblical perspective on everyday issues. I am your host, the Reverend Dr. J. Lauren Russell, and it is my job to engage you in stimulating dialogue that's inspiring, encouraging, and motivating, dialogue and conversations that will help you build your determination, your commitment, and your character, conversations that will help you keep the faith. Everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. And now, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, without further ado, it is time for Matters of Faith, the radio show. Good evening again. It's Monday, April 28th. It's 8 o'clock, and it's time for Matters of Faith, the radio show. I am your host and executive producer, Reverend Dr. J. Lauren Russell, and tonight we're talking about the topic and the article, Stay Connected. We're broadcasting live on our Matters of Faith YouTube channel, as well as the J. Lauren Russell and Matters of Faith Facebook groups. Tonight, my very special guest is Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond. You don't want to miss this tonight. Please telephone and tell a friend that they ought to join us tonight as we discuss Stay Connected on our Matters of Faith YouTube channel and J. Lauren Russell and Matters of Faith Facebook groups with Reverend Dr. Lawrence Hammond. Please don't forget our sponsors and advertisers, the JLR Company and J. Lauren Russell Consulting, LLC, for all of your church financial consulting needs. You need a church loan. You need your trustees to be trained. You need biblical economic training. You need personal loan reduction strategies, property development, property maintenance. Remember, it's not about the castle. It's about the kingdom. Reach out to us. Email us at jlaurenr@jlr.llc. That's JLORENR@jlr.llc. Or simply give us a telephone call at 718-328-8096. That's 718-328-8096. Matters of Faith, the book. You can use our Cash App to obtain it. Just $ Matters of Faith. The book is $24.15. That includes shipping and handling. You can send your check or money order to the JLR Company, Post Office Box 301, New York, New York 10035. That's Post Office Box 301, New York, New York 10035. You can also get it as an ebook by going to www.smashwords.com/books/view/993177. That's www.smashwords.com/books/view/993177. Check out the Eat Okra app for all black-owned restaurants all over the nation. That's right, Eat Okra. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our Matters of Faith YouTube channel. That's the Matters of Faith, the radio show YouTube channel. And last but not least, get your subscription to Better Mag magazine today. A 2-year subscription is only $27.50, and you can get that by going to www.abettermag.com. That's www.abettermag.com. And now the article, Stay Connected. And that article can be found in my column, Matters of Faith, at Yonkers Insider, www.yonkersinsider.blogspot.com, www.yonkersinsider.blogspot.com. The column is also carried in Better Mag magazine, www.abettermag.com. That's www.abettermag.com. And coming soon, it will be in the Positive Community magazine, www.thepositivecommunity.com. The column is also carried in Pamela's Big Heart newsletter. Many of you received the link to the article directly from me, but if not, you can always find it on my social media outlets, Facebook, Matters of Faith, J. Lauren Russell, and LinkedIn, and it can also be found in my Blue Sky account. Stay connected. John chapter 15, verses 4 through 7, New English Translation. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, because apart from me, you can accomplish nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown out like a branch and dries up. and such branches are gathered up and thrown into the fire and are burned up. If you remain in me, and my word remains in you, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. Stay connected. The scripture suggests that staying connected to the vine is a choice. We first get the option to be connected by receiving Christ as our Lord and Savior. Then we get the option to stay connected. The scripture further declares that those who choose to stay connected will forever be connected to God the Father through Christ the Son. God, the vine, has never been guilty of disconnecting himself from the branch. It's always the branch that chooses to disconnect from the vine. Whenever anyone disconnects, their ability to bear fruit ends immediately. I'm sure they still do good things, but they will not be able to bear the fruit because Jesus talks about if they are not connected to the vine. The vine, Christ, is the source of life that produces salvific fruit that opens the portal to everlasting life in the kingdom of God. No one can produce that kind of fruit if they are disconnected from the vine. Productive branches, like productive Christians, are cared for and nurtured. They are fed through the vine and pruned by the gardener so they can produce more fruit. The pruning process can be meticulous and painful because it requires cutting, snipping, clipping, and trimming. Pruning of Christian branches can come with leadership changes, ministry shifts, finance or challenges, or people die. It's at those critical times that the branch must stay connected to the vine. Pruning may result in the branch being cut back, but not cut off. The pruning process helps the branch reap a richer, more fruitful harvest. Fire, rain, storms, floods, when they are connected to the vine, nothing that happens will prevent you from being a fruitful branch. The text sustains this statement, and this text sustains this assessment and says, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. A connected branch is a metaphor of a believer being connected to the vine. A fruit-bearing Christian does the work of an evangelist by feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and equipping the saints so they too can have a fruitful ministry. I want you to recognize that disconnected branches are cut off from the tree and burned. Disconnected Christians are like disconnected branches, cut off and burned. They are no longer fruitful for the body of Christ and no longer productive for the church. When you are connected, Jesus makes us fruitful. Just as the vine nourishes the branches, Christ nourishes those who are connected to him. Whatever you decide to do, decide to stay connected. Be blessed. And now here's my question. What are some signs in your life that you have disconnected yourself from the vine? Let me ask it again. What are some signs in your life that you have disconnected yourself from the vine? And now, Matters of Faith family, it really does give me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to some and then to present to others my very special guest this evening. Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond received his Doctor of Ministry and Master of Divinity degrees both from New York Theological Seminary, where he also serves on the Board of Trustees. His doctoral thesis, entitled Biblical Literacy for Financial and Economic Empowerment Utilizing Selected Parables, provides financial strategies relevant to church leaders and its membership. His educational background also includes a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and Finance from Long Island University. During 4 decades in banking, Dr. Hammond has held the senior positions in both J.P. Morgan Chase Community Development Corporation and Popular Community Bank Commercial Real Estate Group. Formerly credit trained, he has handled the origination and financing of several multi-million-dollar affordable residential and commercial retail development projects throughout the New York City metropolitan area and other U.S. cities. In this role, Dr. Hammond is instrumental in bringing together public and private sources of funding for the creation of successful development projects within underserved communities. Dr. Hammond currently serves as Senior Vice President with the Community Preservation Corporation, a leading not-for-profit entity within the affordable development community, as Director of the Access acquiring capital, and capacity for economic stability and sustainability initiative. Dr. Hammond focuses on empowering black and brown entrepreneurs with access to both human and financial capital resources in the pursuit of development opportunities. Dr. Hammond serves on the ministerial staff at Agape Tabernacle International Fellowship as Associate Pastor of Ministerial Development under the tutelage of Bishop Dr. Barbara Austin Lucas. Married to Dr. Primrose Sinclair Hammond, he is the father of 3 sons and 2 granddaughters. Utilizing his vast banking and financial knowledge, Dr. Hammond endeavors to serve as an empowerment strategist, offering strategic guidance and connecting people to opportunities that will enhance their growth and self-sufficiency needed to build thriving communities. So, Matters of Faith families, would you welcome with me, not for the first time, but he's been here before, he's a return guest, and my friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond. Well, praise the Lord, my good brother. How are you? Let me stop this.
I am doing well. I am doing well.
That's
Thank you so much once again for this wonderful opportunity to sit and to have discourse with you.
well, I appreciate your accepting the offer. I gotta apologize to everybody. I've got this cold. I'm nasally, my voice is not quite there, but we're gonna do this anyway because I don't cancel Matters of Faith unless I have to. And I didn't have to tonight, so here we are. So listen, I've read the bio so people know a little bit about you, but tell me something. Tell us something about you that we don't know and we really should know.
Okay, well, what is it that you don't know that you should know? Well, I think one part of it is that I am extremely proud of the accomplishments that I've been able to achieve over 4 decades of actively involved in building communities through both my secular work as well as my vocational work. And that for me helps to create what I often term as that intersection between faith and practice. And you know, so that's one aspect that may actually come out of the resume, but more so it's an opportunity for me to really reflect on what I've been able to achieve and accomplish over these 4 decades of actively involved. Okay, so yeah. So I started out in banking. Okay, this is something. I started out in banking right out of high school.
Right.
So when I think about the origins of my journey, I started out in banking. I graduated from Erasmus Hall in Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in Brooklyn. I heard a preacher say, Brooklyn born, Brooklyn bred. When I die, Brooklyn dead. I won't take any credit for it, but that was one of the bishops that I heard. So I'm proud. I'm a proud Brooklynite, although I now currently live in Long Island, but I also, our church is in Brooklyn, so I'm frequently there. But getting back to the story, I graduated from high school and I was offered an opportunity to work at Chemical Bank. And, Chemical was around for quite a while. And then with all the various mergers that took place, it became JP Morgan Chase after several iterations of mergers. But thinking that it was just going to be a summer job, and it turned into a 4-decade-long career opportunity. So, that's something. Humble beginnings. I think it's important not to forget small beginnings, right? And where you come from, and then how you're able to reflect on that and continue to give back in that regard. I also like to play golf, but
Oh, is that right?
I know there's quite a few pastors that are part of the organization that you are a part of that are also golf players. And so I said that we're going to get out there and play some more when the time comes. But been playing for about 25 years, but you can't really tell because
Well, I'm not a quote unquote golfer. I don't claim to be a golfer. When I played basketball, I was a basketball player, but I play golf
yeah.
every time I get a chance. And I think the most beautiful course I've ever played on courses were in
Hmm.
Bermuda. No,
Oh,
yeah, in Bermuda.
yeah, yeah. I've played. So my wife is from Jamaica, and so we frequent Jamaica quite often.
Hmm.
Played a few times in Jamaica. One time I was playing, me and my youngest son, who's now 27, but he was a teenager when we were playing, and we had a female caddy, and she must have really been good because she kept looking at us and like just shaking her head. But it was a good opportunity. Yeah, I played on several courses when I was with Chase. I remember I had a mentor. Uh, Her name is Jean Smith. She was a longtime banker, and we had a client that wanted to play at this um, famous golf course called Oak Hill up in Syracuse. I think it
Hmm.
was Syracuse or Rochester, one of those places. And so he asked us, could we get him on the course? And so we were able to make connections through some senior management that were in that
Right.
area.
In that club, right.
And the morning that we were supposed to go up, it was raining, and I was going to take a flight up just to play and then come back. And I was thinking maybe I wouldn't go, and the member of the club, he was like, "Oh, you don't have to come, And my mentor, she said, "If you don't get on that plane, you go up there." She said, "That's your client. That's not his client. That's your client." And that taught me a valuable lesson that relationships, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about how it is that relationships are so important in various ways, and being connected to people that will often provide you a pathway to success. And I appreciated that from her. And I got on the plane. I went up there and we played, and my client, he was thrilled. He was one of these golf connoisseurs. He loved the architecture of the course, and he was like just talking about how the course and the holes were situated, and how the bunkers were aligned to protect the course. I was like, really? Okay.
So, but I'm glad that you said that because probably a great segue. Relationships,
Mhm.
connectedness.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is no connectedness without relationship.
Mm. Wow.
Can't have one without the other. It's nice to talk about it, but you have to have the relationship. And in the article, of course, I wrote about the connection between the vine, which is the God, and then the
Mm.
branches, which are us. But if
Yeah.
there's no connection to the vine, there's no life in the branch.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so the relationship has to be there. And in some instances, we can use a an analogy, if you will, and say that between the vine and the branch, the relationship is with Christ that bridges
Mhm.
the gap.
Yeah. 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 That's
So
so true. And you know, interesting enough, I was at a leadership conference this last weekend. That's why when you called, and I was on my way back from North Carolina and South Carolina, and we made it back this afternoon. So thank God for
I thank God for that because I just want to thank you for doing that because I know that was you were traveling and so on and so forth, and to make yourself available tonight is an honor. I appreciate that
definitely.
relationship. I appreciate it.
And it's about relationship. And so one of the speakers was actually talking about the relationship between the vine and the branches. And they keyed in on that point of those that aren't connected become firewood,
Mm.
and so do you want to be firewood, or do you want to be a thriving, functioning part of God's plan for your life? I think that's important, in terms of one's connectedness and the source of that connection and the choice and the options, right?
Hmm.
Often made
Right.
as to
Right.
how one chooses. Throughout my entire career, it was because of the relationships that I formed, and didn't really understand always what the end was going to be. Um, Another mentor who's now the chairman of Carver Bank, his name is
Mm.
Jones, mentor of mine. And now, 40 years later, he
Mm.
reached out to me about something that he needed some assistance, and I was able to provide some of that assistance. But it's because of the ongoing relationship that was established and the trust that was placed in me, um, and the nurturing aspect of it. You know, Oftentimes people know you, at various intervals of your life. And, at different intervals, there are different connections,
Hmm.
relationships that are made, and those relationships eventually mature and maturate into something that may have started out as a mentor mentee, but then they gradually become sort of on par.
Right. Peer, peer, peer
Yeah,
relationships.
yeah, yeah. And so there's so much to learn from those situations that arise in our lives. And for me now, in this stage of my own uh, professional journey, I'm coming to the part where I want to begin to leverage. I think that's an important word, leverage relationships that I've formed over the years. And it's so apropos. And that's why I really was excited about, being a part of this conversation tonight, because I'm thinking about the connections that one makes. And I say, I just want to be one who connects
Mm.
opportunities and people together. That's where I'm at right now in my overall trajectory of envisioning, what the next steps for me might be in the work that I'm doing. And it has continued to evolve. And so,
Mm. It's interesting. You had said something earlier, and I just want to go back to that. You talked about in the workshop,
mhm,
those who are not connected become firewood.
yeah,
And what I thought about was, and I think I said this in my sermon on yesterday, it's not that you're not useful anymore. You're just limited in your use.
mhm,
You're not losing your eternal crown, but you're losing your ability to be used on an ongoing basis because now you're limited to being firewood. You're just going to provide heat for a minute and then it's going to be over.
wow, wow. That's a nice analogy. And so I think, you know, oftentimes we think about relevancy,
Mm.
right? And I was talking to another person, and they were talking about how, at certain points, whether you remain relevant or not,
Hmm.
that's really contingent upon your ability to be relevant, your ability to be impactful, your ability to continue to be part of the process of providing guidance and I would like to say being a thought leader in various aspects that helps to contribute to the overall conversation that oftentimes may be happening around you, and what it is that you are able to input
Mm.
into that conversation that will bring some relevance to the overall discussion, and bring as well enlightenment and insight. I think those are key attributes in this whole construct of relationship. Um, you know, Jesus, and I'm sure you understand this very well, was all about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes you find Jesus hanging out with the folk that other folk didn't want to hang out with. And so what does that say for us in terms of, the relationships that we form? Who are we forming relationships with?
I mean, think about that. I like that because immediately I thought about relationship that happened in the dark of the night, right? When Nicodemus came to him,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
then when he was crucified, it was Nicodemus
Mm-hmm.
that came and got the body,
Mm-hmm.
and they buried him in a borrowed tomb. So the relationship was established, and then the relationship made sure that the next stages would take place. And here's the thing I was also thinking, that it doesn't matter whether you have been extremely successful in your career in life, you have been very blessed, and you've been very successful in your career, 40 years in banking and other things that you've done, built communities all over the New York City area and beyond, and done a great job of it, providing finances and the ability for people who are of black and brown hues to become involved in that whole process. But it doesn't matter whether you were at that level or you were the janitor.
Yeah.
Everybody has relationships at whatever level of life they exist. And so you have to, and use the word leverage. You still
Mm-hmm.
have to leverage those relationships so that they are still productive and relevant to the circumstances in which you find yourself. And I boil all of that down to what our good friend and mutual friend, Dr. Johnny McCann, would say is bloom where you're planted.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you are, make
Right.
sure that you're blooming wherever you are. That way, you're always going to be relevant and useful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you hit on a good point. No matter where you are in the hierarchical, or in the chain,
Continuum of life, wherever you are.
wherever you're situated, um, do what you've been purposed to do. Um, Oftentimes we look at our hands. Our bishop teaches us at our church to always look in our hands and see what it is that are in our hands that enables us to be able to fulfill and manifest purpose in our lives. And oftentimes, we look in our hands and we think that there's nothing, but there's so much
Mm.
that one has. And whether you're the janitor or the CEO, you have a purpose. And so it is the interaction between individuals that really matters. And I'm purposeful to not forget, my own humble beginnings. My parents were not college educated, grew up in a blue collar family. I didn't know we were poor until, well, listen, I don't like to use the word poor. I didn't know that we were financially constrained
Right.
until I got much older. But
Mm.
then I realized that no matter how we might have been perceived as being, you know, financially challenged at times, there was still always opportunity, to elevate ourselves. And my parents, were able to purchase a home, and,
Mm.
the various things that people would have on on meager earnings, and so, it just, it's a matter of, utilizing what you have, and using what you have to the best of your ability. Um, my siblings were college, educated. I have two older siblings, and so, there was instilled within me, you know, the the, the impetus to continue and to, get my own college education that, you know, set me up for the banking industry. But it didn't come without sacrifice on behalf of others. And I think that's important too. In every relationship, there is going to be a certain amount of sacrifice that's going to be required. And, you just have to determine how much you're willing to give.
Yep. And I'm gonna share some of my personal story because you shared some of yours. I think it's only right to sort of look at both sides of the coin. Um, my parents, I remember wanting to buy a home. That was one of the goals. They were gonna buy a home. My dad was an upholsterer. He made furniture and high school graduate. My mom was a high school graduate. She worked at one time I think in the costume jewelry business. She was making jewelry and stuff like that. And then after a while, my dad said, "No, no, you have to be home with the kids." There was four of us. So he said, I'll provide. So he not only worked, but he also, after his regular job, he would go out to people's homes and fix their furniture, which he used to take me with him quite frequently on Saturdays. I made my extra money. So I was a little young entrepreneur.
Yes.
But then, as we were moving along in life and as, times were changing, I don't know what generation you grew up in, but in my generation, we suddenly had the proliferation of drugs in our community. Huge.
I'm a 60s
Okay,
baby.
so you were there, right? So you were there.
70s, 80s was my, yeah.
Right. So I remember, and I always talk about that period in my that chapter in my life, like a dark cloud descending on the community. I grew up in the South Bronx.
Okay.
So I remember that, and I was just talking to a friend of mine that grew up with me just the other day, and we were talking about how we never locked our doors.
Mm,
We just go from, one apartment to another. We just be gone, not knock on the door, come in, and doors open. We go in. Now, of
yeah.
course, that would never happen today, but that was
Yeah.
the way it was. And so this is the way we grew up as kids. We had that kind of freedom. But then this dark cloud descended. Drugs came into the community really, really hard. And suddenly guys started snatching pocketbooks and robbing people and stealing in order to support this habit that they suddenly had, where in some instances it was $100 a day, and some it was $1,000 a day that they had to get that kind of money to keep that quote unquote, that monkey off their back.
Right.
And then, my parents' plans began to get a little sidetracked. My brother became an addict.
Mm,
And then he wound up going to a rehabilitation program, which was phenomenal. We were all happy about that.
mhm,
And he was coming home. He was home for a visit, his last visit before they discharged him. And it was on Martin Luther King's birthday.
mhm,
I'll never forget this.
mhm,
1972.
mm,
Martin Luther King's birthday. It wasn't a holiday at the time.
right.
We were celebrating it no
Yeah.
matter what, right? My mother died.
Mm,
That changed the whole dynamic of everything.
yeah.
And so instead of the plans to move, it was just to maintain where we were. And so, unfortunately, we didn't have family members who I went to college,
Mhm,
but my brothers did not.
mhm,
Well, actually, my brother next to me, he did go. He did go.
mhm.
He went to college, but he did so while he was in prison.
Mm,
So it's a little different. That
yeah.
the
Yeah.
climate changed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
and then and I remember growing up as kids, now I kind of skipped over this, but my parents made sure that we wanted for nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know how they did this,
Yeah.
but
No.
we were the best dressed family in the whole community.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
pretty much we were like one of only two families in the whole community whose mom and dad was at the house.
Mm,
Mom and dad. And all of our friends, because we were all like, we're only 6 years apart from the youngest to the oldest. My sister
okay.
being the youngest, my oldest brother being the oldest, but only 6 years between us. So we virtually had the same friends.
Right.
And these friends would all come to our house because we used to have food. We had fun. My mother would bake cakes and so on. And anybody who came to my house, my mom's from South Carolina, my father's from North Carolina. So, hey, you coming out, you gonna eat, or give them something to eat. And
Yeah.
then we used to get, I don't know if you remember this, but they used to deliver seltzer water. You could buy that, have seltzer
Okay.
water delivered.
Okay. Okay.
We
Okay.
used to have seltzer water delivered to our house
Right.
along with syrup. We used to make our own sodas. So
Okay.
all of our friends, we made our own sodas. Everybody wanted to be at our house so they
Right.
could make
Right.
sodas. And we did. We had orange and grape and
Right.
cola and whatever else you wanted. We would
Right.
make sodas. We would do that. All of my friends loved coming to the Russell house. We go
Yep.
to the Russell house because we're gonna get something to eat, we're gonna
Yep.
have some fun, and we're gonna make some sodas. But it was interesting because we never really realized that
Hmm.
we were, as you said, financially challenged because my parents made sure that we had whatever
Yep.
it is that we desired.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Amazing
Yep.
thing, right? And
Yeah.
so and so you're right. What happens in life is that you then have to leverage what you've been given because there is no roadmap to how your life is going to evolve, but you have to use the what's in your hand. I like what your bishop says, right? What's in your hand to then begin to develop those things that are going to be necessary for you to be the kind of person that the Lord intended for you to be and stay connected to the vine.
Yep. 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 Yeah. Similar, like I mentioned to you, my mother. So my mother worked at Abraham and Strauss A&S
Hmm.
down in Brooklyn
Mhm.
on Fulton Street. And I think they just closed that now. It was a Macy's, and I think it's now closed.
Wow.
She worked at Abraham and Strauss, and she worked part-time because she had a heart condition.
Right.
And I never knew why my mother worked part-time, I'm like,
Right.
why? Like, why couldn't she only work 20 hours,
Right.
And then it's only after time that I realized that, there was, uh, she couldn't work anymore because of her condition. But I always used to meet her under the near the elevator bank under the clock, and and this is when I was just starting out in my banking career, and she had that discount from A&S. I would get me those nice suits, and I would always promise to pay her back, and most times I did.
Okay. Okay.
But she had a saying. She says, if I lend you, I lend you. If I give you, I give you.
Right.
So there was a difference,
Absolutely.
I, if you borrowed it,
Got to pay it back.
it's it,
Got to pay it back.
and unfortunately, I think some of our generation, there's an entitlement
Right. Right.
where they feel that they're entitled to certain things. And so I don't know about you, but I got older children, that I've sort of tried to help, you know, in various ways, but always trying to get them to understand, the tenets of good, sound financial management and financial planning. And I think that's so critical to a lot of people. Um, no matter what you make or earn, it's also how you effectively utilize your finances in a way that you can then leverage your finances for opportunities that may, come your way. And I think that's equally important. That was part of my work for my dissertation around biblical financial literacy, just utilizing various texts in the Bible, parables to sort of give some real basic financial principles and strategies. Um, and
I do, I don't know if you know this, but my background is financial planning. That's what I
okay,
do, money
yeah,
management.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I created a workshop that I call biblical economics.
Mm.
And I just did it on Saturday, just did it on
Oh, okay.
Saturday. And it's interesting because in this particular workshop, I took a different approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about stewardship of all things,
Mm.
starting with time,
Mm.
stewardship of your time,
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about time being the most precious gift that God gives to us, and
Mm.
then managing that, and then
Mm-hmm.
understanding that He is the giver of all good and perfect gifts. Then you put everything else under His rule. So the question becomes, who's sitting on the throne? Is it you or is it Christ? If He's at the head of the table, if He's sitting on the throne, then everything falls in line because you're following the master. But if you're on the throne, then everything is all disarrayed. And so you're absolutely right. You know, I love your mom's statement. I love. There's a difference between lending and giving. Well, I have that same philosophy, and I remember if he's watching, he'll tell you my nephews are, they're super grown. They have grown children themselves. I have no biological children, but all of my nephews and nieces and grandnephews and those are my children. There's a whole bunch of them on both sides. But I said, listen, I remember my nephew asked me to borrow some money one day, and I think he was about 16 or 17 years old. I said, listen, you want to borrow money from me because if you borrow it, you got to pay it back.
Right,
I said, I'll give it to you. He said, no, 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 Unc, I'm going to pay you back. I'm going to pay you back. I said, now you listen to what you're saying now.
right,
Because if you say you're going to pay it back, I'm expecting you to pay it back.
right.
He said, no, I'm going to pay you back. Unc, I'm going to pay you. I said, okay. You sure about that? Ask him when the next time it was he could borrow money from me. He was 16. He's 50 years old.
Did he pay you back yet?
Nope. But he's never been able. I said, I don't do. I'm telling. I'm real serious about that, right? I don't do that because when the Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender.
Mm-hmm.
So if you borrow it, then you become my subject.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the right to choose how I get repaid or anything else. You
Right,
don't want to, but if I give it to you, it's yours. So I
right,
remember he called me one day. He said, Unc, I know that you don't loan me any money. He said, baby, but my son is really ill and I got to get this medication for him. And so I said, you don't have to ask me for that. I said, that's done. Don't worry about it.
right,
Got
right,
that. I got that. And I said, bang, take care of that. Here's something else for you. Don't worry about it. No problem. See, I have no problems with the giving, right? But when
right.
you got to understand that when you are using language like loan and borrow, there's an obligation that goes along with that.
Right.
Without understanding that, you can get yourself in a world of trouble that you can oftentimes never get out of.
I mean, case in point. So I have a freshman granddaughter. She's a freshman at Alabama State.
Hmm.
And so when she was getting ready to go away to school, we set her up and everything, and she reached out, Grandpa, I need $50. I'll pay you back. I said, okay. Gave her $50. Next day or a few days later, she paid me back.
Hmm.
So she did that a couple of times, you know, borrowed it and paid me back. So
She
now
set
what is
you
she
up.
doing? She's setting up a good
Right.
record.
Track record. Yep.
Now, when
Yep.
she says, Grandpa, can you, you know, can I borrow something? I have no problem because I know that she's going to honor her commitment. And there are times when I give her double. So
Right.
she'll borrow 50, she'll pay me back, and then I'll send her 100.
Right.
So I think she's starting to learn that part. But it's the lessons that we want to teach our children
Absolutely.
at an early age, and I think that's so important, and especially, for those, especially in these difficult times now that we find
Mm,
ourselves in, right? Where we're trying to manage our finances in a reasonable way, and it's gonna require some wise financial strategies.
right, right, right.
I know for me, I one of the strategies that I often used. I know there's good debt and bad debt, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes people don't know the difference between good debt and bad debt,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your mortgage is considered to be good debt, as long as you continue to maintain it and pay that principal and interest, you build up credit and things of that nature. Um, and so, only reason I'm saying that is because when you have good credit, it creates opportunities that others may not always have. And so I
Right,
remember
right.
when my son was in college, and they would send me those checks where you would get like no interest for 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would use that check to pay his tuition, and then we would pay it back within 12 months.
Right.
And he went through college without pretty much any student debt because we were able to
Mm.
leverage, you know, um, some opportunities. But if I didn't have good credit, I
Mm-hmm.
would not have been given that opportunity to tap into those type of resources.
Right.
And so, I'm always, trying to teach my children and anyone that will listen that, um, credit is really important in one's life.
Let me dovetail on that one right quick
Mm-hmm,
because we've got some people who are obviously, they're with churches and things like that, and I do church finance, and so do you.
mm-hmm.
Talk about the importance of churches, institutions having a good quote unquote credit rating. And of course, they don't do it the same way with churches, but
Right.
talk about the need for them to have good record keeping
Yeah, yeah,
skills.
yeah. I mean, any lender is going to want to see any lender who's lending you money
Yeah.
wants to ensure that there is a sound financial platform in place that is going to be conducive to a repayment scenario. And so it's important to have good financial record keeping. Don't necessarily have to have audited financials, but you need to have financials,
Right.
some type of financials, whether they're management prepared or 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 self-prepared and then review. There are various levels of review of financial statements. But it's important to know what you're bringing in and what your expenditures are, and then that will help to be able to strategize, how much you will be able to leverage or borrow.
Hmm.
And without that, it's sort of like, taking a trip without, directions. And, if you're going someplace and you don't have any directions, you know, it, it could be a difficult task. And so I think it's really important to have and that oftentimes there are people within your congregations that provide those resources. And so then it becomes an ability
Mm.
to delegate and to trust folk who have that certain expertise that they can bring to the table that will help to benefit uh, one's financial position. Yeah.
Yeah, I asked the question because, as you know, when I'm speaking with churches and doing my work with them, and
Mm-hmm.
I need to have from them their financial
Mm-hmm.
statements, their financial records. I said, I need at least 3 years of
Mm-hmm.
financials, all right, so I can see whether or not the bottom line is whether or not you can pay back this money that you want to borrow, right? Because
Right.
no lender is interested in getting your property. They don't want you, but they're not in the property business. They're in the money business, so they want to get the money back.
Yeah.
So we need to see what's going in and what's going out. And what we do is we want to calculate and see whether or not you have the capacity for that
Yeah.
loan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever it is, so let's see what are your fixed costs and what are your variable costs?
Yeah.
And then after all of that, is there any discretionary money? It's the same thing you do in a personal
Yeah.
personal analysis. Then is there any discretionary dollars left over to do other things?
Yeah.
Now, if there are no discretionary dollars, you see a piece of property that you want to buy, and that piece of property costs $3 million, but your take in from tithes and offering is $120,000 a year. You can't afford that.
Right.
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 And then don't tell me what the Lord will provide. No, he already did. But you don't have the resources to make that happen. So we got to be more realistic. And sometimes talking to people who are looking to expand from a realistic perspective, not just the Lord will provide perspective,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
and it becomes
Yeah.
a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
But then that's why I do a lot of consulting. Let's work with this because it may take you 3 or 4 years to get to a place where you can actually purchase the building or the property or to do the development that you want to do or to do the renovations that you want to do to your property. But
Right.
when you go before the lending institution, you'll be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to be financially ready, as you indicated. And I think that's the challenge, as you have mentioned, that there are folk that have good intentions,
Hmm.
but when you look at all the other variables, they may not necessarily be there. And so then how do you articulate that in a manner and in a way that brings it home? I think that's sort of where the rubber meets the road, right? In those situations. So what is it that you often I'm thinking about, you know, um, you know, what is your value proposition?
Mm.
You know, when talking to faith leaders that want to do certain development, um, what is it that you are able to bring to the table that you can then leverage in order to get projects done or to bring other partners into the mix? I think that's, an important piece. And so, if you have land or building and there's no debt on it, then you have something that you can leverage, um, and understanding what the value of that is
Hmm.
factored into an overall development opportunity, then is a starting point where you can then have serious conversation. But it's also about, making sure that you have the right people at the table with you, and that's the piece that I think is really important with anyone that is looking to do any type of development, making sure that you have the right people at the table with you. Um, you know, if you're going to do development, you want to make sure that you have the right architect, you have the right contractor or developer slash contractor, ensuring that you have the right legal team in place. And then there are owners reps or people that will act on your behalf. Because I think, and I think I mentioned this before the last time we were talking, oftentimes we know how to put a 3-part sermon together, right? 3 points, beginning, ending, 3 points, but do you know how to put that, development budget together? and do you know how to bring the various pieces together? And if you don't, then it's a matter of who can you then have that is working with you that you can trust. And I think that's an important piece there. Often in the faith community, they have often been misaligned with individuals that will come and take advantage of opportunities. And so I think, for yourself and I think bringing that faith and finance component to spiritual leaders or faith leaders is an important piece that will often create, opportunity.
Yeah, and it's interesting because for me, I've been doing this work for a number of years in different capacities. Even when I was lending, you talk to a pastor and of course they want, because they prayed about it, and I respect the prayer, I respect the relationship, but we got to make sure that they all are in alignment. And what you're saying about making sure that the right people are in the right spots, that you made the right choices, comes back to what we've been talking about to begin with the article and with the stay connected. Having connections with people who, if you don't know who they are, then someone that you might know
Right.
who they are. And then respect those connections, respect those relationships, because they may come with information that you don't know, and they can make things happen. But you sometimes you second guess your own decisions because you don't understand the process. And if you don't understand the process, it can create a problem, because then you sort of undermine the things that are taking place that person knows that you don't, but you don't, not knowing it, undermine the process by doing things that really that hamper the whole process, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I think, what's really important is how we leverage those relationships and build trust.
Right.
I think that's the first part of all of this work that we may endeavor to work in this space, building that trust. And then once the trust is established, I think then there's opportunity to really move forward on the other aspects, and knowing your role and your part, right?
Right. And that's really important. And it doesn't matter that you leverage the proposition, or you came with value of the proposition, but you got to recognize what your role is in that entire process. So it's important that you know what that is, because then you can muddy the waters pretty badly, and it can prevent something from happening that really could happen.
So a lot of development now is happening.
Yes.
And I think there are those opportunities. There are many folk that are out there that are looking to be a source of empowerment to faith communities now. And I think it's really about understanding what your mission is and what you're trying to achieve and accomplish. And so, I'm an affordable housing lender. And so I always look to affordable housing as a place where, faith communities can build and create thriving communities. But there may be other needs that are out there in the communities that are equally important. And so it's really about surveying what the need, making an assessment of what the real need is within your community that you're serving. Um, is it a food desert? And so do you perhaps need, to bring some fresh produce or groceries or things of that nature into the community? The community may be saturated already with enough housing and may need some other, amenities to really support the community. Well, daycare, childcare, senior care, all of those various components of a thriving community are important. And knowing how you can leverage your relationships within the midst of community and with other like-minded partners is equally important, I think.
Well, I think that's good. We use that as a segue. That's a good way to segue. We're going to segue into our next portion. You notice I put your handsome face up on the screen
Okay.
along with mine, trying to help myself look a little bit better, putting you up there with me. But I'm going to we're gonna kind of go back, recognize our sponsors and advertisers, and then come back with the second part of the show. And I'm going to emphasize to everybody that's out there, I put a question on this, out as I always do. And my questions are designed to help you to become involved in this conversation. So that's not two talking heads, but it's really a dialogue with all of us. And so I'm going to ask that you address that question. And the question that I'm asking tonight, it's not a difficult question, but it is challenging. Definitely is challenging. What are some signs in your life that you have disconnected yourself from the vine? So you got to take some introspection on that one. So what I and Dr. Hammond are going to do, we're going to disappear for a few moments, and then we will come back with the second half of our, with the second hour of our broadcast tonight, and then we will then go from there. Okay, is that fair? Sounds good. Okay, we'll be back in a few minutes. Please don't forget our sponsors and advertisers, the JLR Company and J. Lauren Russell Consulting LLC, for all of your church financial consulting needs. You need a church loan, you need the trustees to be trained, you need biblical economic training, you need personal loan reduction strategies, property development, property maintenance. Remember, it's not about the castle, it's about the kingdom. Reach out to us. Email us at jlaurenr@jlr.llc. That's JLORENR@jlr.llc. Or simply give us a telephone call at 718-328-8096. That's 718-328-8096. Matters of Faith, the book. You can use our Cash App to obtain it. Just $ Matters of Faith. The book is $24.15. That includes shipping and handling. You can send your check or money order to the JLR Company, Post Office Box 301, New York, New York 10035. That's Post Office Box 301, New York, New York 10035. You can also get it as an ebook by going to www.smashwords.com/books/view/993177. That's www.smashwords.com/books/view/993-177. Check out the Eat Okra app for all black-owned restaurants all over the nation. That's right, Eat Okra. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our Matters of Faith YouTube channel. That's the Matters of Faith, the radio show YouTube channel. And last but not least, get your subscription to Better Mag magazine today. A 2-year subscription is only $27.50, and you can get that by going to www.abettermag.com. That's www.abettermag.com. And now the article. Stay connected. And that article can be found in my column Matters of Faith at Yonkers Insider, www.yonkersinsider.blogspot.com, www.yonkersinsider.blogspot.com. The column is also carried in Better Mag magazine, www.abettermag.com. That's www.abettermag.com. And coming soon, it will be in the Positive Community magazine, www.thepositivecommunity.com. The column is also carried in Pamela's Big Heart newsletter. Many of you received the link to the article directly from me, But if not, you can always find it on my social media outlets: Facebook, Matters of Faith, J. Lauren Russell, and LinkedIn. And it can also be found in my Blue Sky account. Stay connected. John chapter 15, verses 4 through 7, New English Translation. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, because apart from me you can accomplish nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown out like a branch and dries up, and such branches are gathered up and thrown into the fire and are burned up. If you remain in me, and my word remains in you, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. Stay connected. The scripture suggests that staying connected to the vine is a choice. We first get the option to be connected by receiving Christ as our Lord and Savior. Then we get the option to stay connected. The scripture further declares that those who choose to stay connected will forever be connected to God the Father through Christ the Son. God, the vine, has never been guilty of disconnecting himself from the branch. It's always the branch that chooses to disconnect from the vine. Whenever anyone disconnects, their ability to bear fruit ends immediately. I'm sure they still do good things, but they will not be able to bear the fruit because Jesus talks about if they are not connected to the vine. The vine, Christ, is the source of life that produces salvific fruit that opens the portal to everlasting life in the kingdom of God. No one can produce that kind of fruit if they are disconnected from the vine. Productive branches, like productive Christians, are cared for and nurtured. They are fed through the vine and pruned by the gardener so they can produce more fruit. The pruning process can be meticulous and painful because it requires cutting, snipping, clipping, and trimming. Pruning of Christian branches can come with leadership changes, ministry shifts, finance or challenges, or people die. It's at those critical times that the branch must stay connected to the vine. Pruning may result in the branch being cut back, but not cut off. The pruning process helps the branch reap a richer, more fruitful harvest. Fire, rain, storms, floods, when they are connected to the vine, nothing that happens will prevent you from being a fruitful branch. The text sustains this statement, and this text sustains this assessment and says, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. A connected branch is a metaphor of a believer being connected to the vine. A fruit-bearing Christian does the work of an evangelist by feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and equipping the saints so they too can have a fruitful ministry. I want you to recognize that disconnected branches are cut off from the tree and burned. Disconnected Christians are like disconnected branches, cut off and burned. They are no longer fruitful for the body of Christ and no longer productive for the church. When you are connected, Jesus makes us fruitful. Just as the vine nourishes the branches, Christ nourishes those who are connected to him. Whatever you decide to do, decide to stay connected. Be blessed. And now here's my question for the last time this evening. What are some signs in your life that you have disconnected yourself from the vine? Let me ask that question one more time. What are some signs in your life that you have disconnected yourself from the vine? Well, Matters of Faith family, you know a lot more about my guest than you did before, Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond. But he's married. His wife, you can see her beautiful picture. His children. He's a minister of the gospel, and he's a businessman working with and throughout the New York City area to make life better for all of us. Associate Pastor of Ministerial Development at Agape Tabernacle International Fellowship, and Senior Vice President with the Community Preservation Corporation. Matters of Faith family, welcome with me again for the second half of the show, Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond. Okay, that brings us back together again.
You snuck in there some pictures there.
I surely did, Doc. I surely did. I went and did some research. You want to talk about any of them? There might be something there that you want to share.
Yeah, well, my wife and I are celebrating 30 years of marriage, and
Okay.
this coming August,
Congratulations.
and we're empty nesters. So my son's up there in the upper right hand corner, my right, maybe others left. So those are two of my three sons that are there. The youngest is Brendan. He's 27, and then my oldest son is Terrence, and then we have another oldest son, Jermaine. And so I got three sons and two granddaughters, but equally proud of all of them in their various occupations. My youngest, he's an entrepreneur. I
Okay.
don't know if he's watching tonight, but just um, it's a whole different generation now, you know,
Got you.
of entrepreneurship. When we graduated from college, we went out and found a 9 to 5, right? Most of us did.
Hmm.
I did. I don't know about yourself, but found a 9 to 5, and you kind of work that. This younger generation, not all of them choose to do that. Some of them want to just jump right into it and create their own pathway and everything. And so, I applaud them for that, but I'm also a little hesitant in making sure that as we're discussing being connected, that you're still connected to some of the principles
Mm.
of success. And so there has to be a foundation. And I think when you ask the question, you know, what are some of the signs of being disconnected? If you're disconnected from your foundational aspects, that's a warning sign,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a warning sign. You want to stay, just as the branch is connected to the vine, we as individuals need to be connected to those things that have um, preserved us or given us understanding and given us meaning in life. And a lot of that is family, God, and others. And if you are disconnected from any one of those three, then those could be signs that there's something else happening, that you need to really take notice of.
Well, I appreciate your addressing that question because that's what I was going to ask you to do, but you've already done it. And I think you're right. I think that when you look at your life and you look at what your priorities are, right? You talked about value propositions, but in your life, what's your value proposition? What do you bring to the table? What are you expecting to get out of this deal, so to speak? And what do you have to put in? And it's interesting because sometimes we don't know all that we have to offer.
Right.
We're connected to the vine. The Lord can do things with us that we could never even imagine. I mean, you talked about it early on. You said, I started out and I thought that this was going to be a summer job, and it turned out to be a 40-year career. So
Yeah.
we really don't know what the Lord can do with us unless we avail ourselves to Him using us in the way that He sees best.
I
Um,
think along that journey, there were moments and times in my own life where I felt disconnected
mm,
from purpose, and I had to kind of get realigned. Um, I went through a divorce
mm,
and got remarried and been married now 30 years. But during that time of that early period, I lost focus
yeah.
on certain things. I started my priorities were misaligned. And
Mm,
oftentimes as leaders in the church, we put our church work above our family.
yeah, we do. We can do that pretty easily.
And at a very young age, I part of that And there were other reasons, but I think one of the factors of why my first marriage didn't work out is because my priorities were kind of like misaligned. And then it came to a point where, I kind of lost everything
Hmm.
and went through this period of sort of like drought and,
Wow.
and you know, was sort of like high up there
Yeah.
and all of a sudden found myself down in the valley and trying to figure out like, how did I get down here? Right. And now how do I get out? And it was only when I really decided to let go
Uh-huh.
and let God
Yeah.
and to reconnect myself to what that purpose was. And in that period of time for me is when I got my second, or I won't say my second, but it's when I got my calling to the ordained ministry. It was at a point in my life when I was at my lowest. And so
Hmm.
wonder like, can God use you when you're like down in the pit? Yeah, you know,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
sometimes God gets your attention, you know, when you have nowhere else to go but to God.
You know, there was met a woman. She wasn't a young lady. She was the matriarch of a friend's family.
Mm-hmm.
His dad died, and I did the homegoing service. And she said to me, she says, "This is a difficult period for us right now, but I've always told my children, always told my nephews and my nieces, everybody." She says, "When you get a setback, don't step back
Mm.
because you've been set up for a comeback."
Yep.
She said, "That's what I've always told them all of their lives." And everyone can, and they actually said it. And I said to her, I said, "You know, I really like that." I said, "Do you mind if I write an article on that?" She said, "I'd be delighted." I wrote the article, right? Don't, when you get a setback, don't step back because you've been set up for a comeback.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we literally have to be at our lowest point before we actually release ourselves for the Lord to actually use us. Because beyond that, I think we spend a lot of time trying to do it ourselves. And you
And so,
can't,
yeah. And so, you know, don't be so hard on yourself
right?
because
Yeah,
there are going to come those moments when you are disconnected
absolutely.
because of the choices that you may have made that were not aligned with God's will. There's a song that ministers to me every single time I hear it.
Hmm.
It brings tears to my eyes. Monique Walker, Hezekiah Walker, and Love Fellowship, The Will of God.
Hmm.
I don't know if you ever heard that song.
No, but I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna get it because I have his library.
The Will of God. And it talks about um, you know, what we do in life and how God orders our steps. He has the perfect plan in mind, and
Hmm.
that sometimes we step out, but He made us. His will is good
Yeah.
and it's perfect and it's acceptable, you know? And, you know, it's really about staying in the will of God that will keep you connected.
Hmm.
And there are times when we step out of God's will. And how do we know that? Because things are not going in the manner that is already pre
Ordained,
prescribed or
pre-prescribed,
ordained.
preordained.
And you'll know that. And so what it is that you need to do then is to like pause, recalibrate yourself, and move back into the purpose that God has established for your life. And it happens oftentimes during various seasons of our lives, as you indicated.
And the question wasn't really one of a like is it, would it, could it? No, it will. It will.
Mhm.
It will happen to you. It will, because there's no getting around it. What are some signs in your life that you have disconnected yourself from the vine? We all are going. I don't care. I'll give you the Pope. That make any difference. That's the human dynamic in which we live. We're going to disconnect ourselves from time to time. But the Lord understands that. You just don't want to be disconnected so much that you become firewood,
Yeah, yeah,
because we can always be grafted back in. That's the wonderful thing about the rebirth. That's the wonderful thing about Christ dying for us, is that we can be regrafted and made a part of the whole all over again and be part of the vine. So don't feel like, I can't answer that question, because if I answer that question, it's going to sound like I am, I'm not a true believer. No, I had nothing to do with that. Everybody's going to experience this. I don't care who you are. You could be the pastor of the biggest church in the world. Doesn't matter. You're in this flesh. And in this flesh, you will have those bouts. You will have that.
I think there's a certain amount of vulnerability that we all need to experience at times.
Hmm.
Um, and being vulnerable does not necessarily mean that you're now gullible,
Right. Right.
but it means that you are reflective on your own humanity,
Hmm.
and then how you then um, use that as a resetting
Mm.
tool for you. Um, and so, you know, um, was at that lowest point in my life, felt that call to ministry, um, went to seminary, but still, oftentimes, even though you get the training and everything, there are still those moments when you're still, you know, struggling
Hmm.
with your call. Um, but I like the fact that I know that my ministry is much more than what I have often deemed it to be. And when I step back and really look at the totality of all that I do, um, it's amazing how God strategically aligns you with every step of your life.
Mm.
Um, I remember when I joined Community Preservation Corp. My first day there, uh, uh, I was on the lending team, and my first day there, I went and met with some faith leaders. And so I was like, wow, God,
Mm.
you got a funny sense of humor, right?
Mm.
My first day at this new company, and I'm meeting with some faith leaders. And so I understand that God really had me, or has me there, for a purpose. And now, the work that I've been doing for the last 5 years of equipping, individuals with access to capital is really important. We stand on four pillars of our work in terms of how we're using education, advocacy, investment, and innovation to bring capital resources to Black and Brown developers. And even in spite of what's happening in the country now, in terms of all of the pushback, and I
Hmm.
just read something, you know, um, President of the United States that got rid of the Justice Department's unit on civil rights, or no, voting rights.
Mm.
And so, in his first 100 days, he's managed through executive orders to kind of dismantle a lot of the things that we um, have had as our source of, of protection
Or
of our
fought for,
affairs.
and and won. It wasn't given to us, it was earned. We won that. We fought for it. We died for it. We sacrificed, as you talked about before. There was a huge sacrifice that was made in order for us to achieve those goals. And just with the stroke of
Yeah.
a pen, you know.
So as faith leaders, we really have to really be intentional. And I use that word often in terms of intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
being intentional. There's aspiration and then there's intentionality. Aspiration is like, what you hope for.
Right.
Intentionality is what you really move towards to achieve with some deliberation. And so for the last 5 years, the work that we've been doing at CPC to equip Black and Brown developers with access to both human and financial capital has really been a game changer. We just graduated our sixth cohort of developers, and so we've taken about 225 novice and emerging developers through a training program that equips them with some basic tools for development, because development is not intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. Oftentimes, the majority developers, they have come through with that family and friends network,
Right.
and oftentimes, as people of color, we haven't had um, that afforded to us in terms of a family and friends network. We haven't had generational wealth. I just finished listening to a book. It was, oh, you get older, you just forget stuff, right?
That's okay. Short pencils. You see, I got one. Short pencils versus long memories. I write it down.
Yeah. But this book was just really helpful. I'm going to just pull it up real quick. Maybe some of your listeners might also be interested in. Oh, it's called the Black Scorecard, the Black Power Scorecard by Andre Perry, and it was just a good book on. This is on. And now it's playing for me, right?
Was it the Black Power? I wrote the name down of the author.
Scorecard.
Scorecard, right? Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Just helping to understand the various dimensions of challenges that we've all experienced in our lives, and how we then utilize that and for so it talks about not a business venture, power to live, 40 acres and a mall.
Mm.
Black business built, Black power getting to closing. And so just different aspects, but a pretty good read. And there are a lot of books out there that are talking about that subject. But I think it's really important in this time that we get back to our own understanding of who we are as a people and the faith that has allowed us to continue to be here. I went to Ghana back in January of 2024, and came back from that experience understanding that the reason why we are all here is because there's that survival uh, in our DNA. There were many that did not survive. Unfortunately, those who lost lives during the Middle Passage, those who actually took their own lives
Right.
because they didn't want to be enslaved. But those of us that are here have that survival motif, that DNA in our genes, and so we're going to continue to survive in order that we might thrive. But it's really what we do in the midst of all of that's happening that will really determine, how successful we will continue to be.
My theme at the church this year is survive and thrive in 2025.
Mm,
So everything that I'm preaching this year, including this article, Stay Connected, is about not only surviving, but reaching up to thrive. And so when we're connected to the vine, and I'm go back to that for a second,
Hmm.
all the things that you mentioned, the understanding that we have survived through the worst of anything that anyone has ever experienced in the history of mankind, we're still here. And we have fought and have won under the worst of circumstances. We've been here before,
Yeah.
and we're going to be here after, because this too shall pass,
Yeah.
but we're still going to be standing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's no doubt about it. We're going to have it's going to be a changed world. It's going to be a changed country. But, change doesn't always mean bad, doesn't mean good, it means different. But because we're so adaptable, we'll make it work. We'll
And
make
so, what we're going to do, what are we going to do to equip and prepare ourselves, for the next number of years? I think it's through those relationships,
Yep. Yep.
strategic partnerships that we've formed, and then how we continue to leverage those opportunities and how we continue to share the information that we all have
Right.
with one another, and use it as a means of empowerment. And
See,
so,
what you're saying, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I really want to delve in, because what you're saying is that, and the relationship that you bring to the table tonight is really the direction that we must go in. How do we build that economic power base so that we can put ourselves in a position so that we're not subject to the whims and the will of people who have the dominant dollar, so that they can determine what's going to happen from one day to the next? We have to be in that circle of influence. We have to be able to be decision makers for things like homes and housing, and what's coming into and going out of our communities. Even though our communities are not, it wasn't, you were in Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, I'm in the South Bronx, that's where we came from. It's no different back then, right?
mhm,
Now we're scattered everywhere, but we're still a community. We're just a scattered community, like some scattered site housings, right? We're
yeah,
we're still
yeah,
a community. We
yeah,
just are in different places, but we have to recognize that now our network has wide. It hasn't. That's what happened in that's what happened in the Bible with the gospel. They were scattered, and they took the gospel everywhere. So this is an opportunity for us to really take those divides and turn them into communities all over the place.
yeah, 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 yeah. And so, connections, it's really about connecting people with the resources, and that will help to impact and bring about change. It's really about being strategic, and providing that guidance, and also, as you mentioned, expanding our networks of influence, and then there's that part of advocacy, and we have to be those that are those thought leaders, that are out there, um, that can come from a shared experience. Um, I love the work that I do because it is because of a shared experience that I can articulate what are the challenges, and can be a voice in the midst of others that are trying to figure, you know, strategies, and ways of implementing certain things. I That's really important in that construct. Um,
Well, I'm in agreement with you. I think that the things that you said, the connections, the resources, the creating the impact, strategic planning and creating strategic initiatives, networking, using our networks to influence in different areas. I'm doing some work. I don't know if I told you this. I started a chaplaincy. And so we have 92 chaplains graduating a new class next cohort. You are in the sixth cohort. We're in our fourth cohort.
Okay.
They'll bring them in, and that will be on May 17th. And we've been doing some work. We've been blessed to have done some work with the mayor's office. We're doing some work now with the district attorney's office. We're doing stuff that just it's just mind-boggling, actually. But it's amazing because it's what needs to be done. It's really just expanding the network, and it's with the intention is to create an alternative to incarceration for youth,
Mhm.
which is very much needed. But it's going to put us in circles that we would not ordinarily be in, getting to those young people. Could you just imagine for a moment getting to the young people with what they think will be just okay, believe in the Lord and things will be fine, come to church. And we're saying to them, no, how do you develop property? How do you get into this area? How do you change the community in which you live? How can you be a part of that whole dynamic of change, not just on a peripheral basis, but on a real integral basis? And they come in and they see that coming from a godly perspective, being connected to the vine. Then they can see that their hope is built on nothing less. That old song that we sing, than Jesus's blood
Yeah.
and righteousness, but they'll see it because they'll feel it. And then that's what I look at, right? How can we bring this this concept of God and his almighty power and let people know that it's available for you. Don't disconnect from the vine. And if you've never been connected, we'll show you how to do that too. We'll get you grafted back in. So that's what I'm excited about, because that's what you're saying, creating a network that's bigger than anything we could have ever seen. And because of the changes that's coming out of our governmental leadership, it's going to be even more important for us to develop those networks in all of the communities in which we live.
It's a holistic approach, but it's also, you know, in the construct of meeting people where they are.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think, for our young people, I think the challenge there is that they've been somewhat disconnected
Mm,
because of all of the other media, um, tools and things that have them. You remember when we used to go outside and play,
absolutely. Skellies and kick the can
all
and
of that,
hopscotch and you name it, man. Yes.
right? And everybody was out there,
Ringolinho.
Coco Livia, right? Right? And hot peas and butter.
That's right. That's right. That's right. You
kids don't
know,
kids don't know any of that now.
nope. Nope.
Connect, but they're connected virtually. And
Yes.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Well, think about this. I've seen situations where they say they want to have a party, right? A get together, and they will go online and literally within an hour, 500 people show up at one spot, just
Wow.
like that. That's in my generation, your generation, that's unheard of. I mean, you plan a house party forever. You know what I'm saying? You buy flyers and all that kind of stuff, and you get, 40, 50, 60 people. They talk about 300 or 400 people just like that. So see, they have, they live in a world that we can't even imagine. So it's now our responsibility to help them to navigate into the world in which we live and bring their world into our world and teach us what we don't know so that we can share with them what they don't know so that we can all thrive together as a community.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I totally agree in that sense. And so therein lies the challenge of how you bridge those relationships and how you continue to be connected
Right,
to the younger generation. Because I'm an OG with a young heart, right?
right, right,
And I understand, there are things that, I may not necessarily um, be in total agreement with, but I'm open to having the dialogue and open to having the experience. And so I think in that sense, there is something there that can be achieved by, allowing the alignment of all the various resources um,
right.
that are out there to actually be beneficial.
Let me share this with you. This is interesting. And the workshop that I did on Saturday, they were about, I think I had about 15 people in the workshop. One was a young man, he's about 15 years old, and he was there with his grandmother. And so I was doing the workshop and I was talking about literally God in control of everything, time and everything else. And I asked everybody questions. I got everybody's involvement. But when we came to the summation, everybody came together from the different workshops. And the pastor asked that somebody tell me one thing that you learned from the workshop. This young man stood up. He said, in Dr. Russell's class, he said, it was boring and I almost went to sleep. But I learned that God is really in control of everything. And that if we put him on the throne, that he will make sure that everything in our lives be in alignment, including our finances. He says, so I've learned that what I need to do is sort of turn my life around, turn it over to him so that he can take care of all of the things that are important to me.
Wow.
And I said, he got all of that and he almost went to sleep. So they're paying attention,
Yep.
but they're just doing it in a different kind of a way.
Way.
You understand what I'm saying? So I was impressed with that because he's the one that, you think, well, he's not gonna pay attention. He's not even thinking about, financial management or money management or anything else. But then when I said to them, I said, towards the end, I said to them, I said, let me ask you a question. How many of you use Cash App?
Mm-hmm.
Raising hand, I said, do you know you can buy stock on Cash App?
Mm.
They said, really? I said, yeah, you can buy stock, buy Bitcoin on Cash App. I said, you go in anytime you want. And I said, I know what you're thinking. What do you buy?
Right.
I said, well, let me ask you a question. What do you buy? What do you buy? Where do you spend your money at? I
Mm-hmm.
said, what kind of phone do you use?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What kind of car do you drive?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you're investing in here, you can invest in there.
Right. Right.
That's where you can start. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. I said you can put as many as another $5. Just get started doing it. And you'll
Yeah.
get used to it. I said, because it's not like it was when I was growing up, when you had to go and get a stockbroker and you got to pay them money and you don't understand anything that they're talking about. You can look it up yourself. You can see what the stock is doing. You see the bar graphs and everything else. Just do it. Just do it. Get involved in learning what it is that's out there.
Yep.
I said, you'll be surprised. It's crazy, right? I said, Bitcoin, I don't understand a bit about it. Man, the moon is nothing. I said, but it's like 50, 60% increase in value. It just keeps going up and it's worth nothing. It's nothing but an idea.
Yeah. 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 I'm a little
So
risk averse to Bitcoin.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I watch it. I was like, this is ridiculous. But it's
but
it's nuts.
but
I mean,
it's
but I'm saying that interestingly enough, you want to get their attention so that they can become involved and stay connected to the process that we're talking about so that they don't miss the opportunities that are presented to them going forward so that they're not left in the lurch when we get these things like the voting rights commission has been dismantled.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we got a responsibility,
Yes, we do.
you know, to our younger generation, but we have to understand how to talk their language.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Without question.
I am so my youngest son, I was telling you that he's an entrepreneur and
Hmm.
he's into the arts,
Hmm.
and I wasn't too excited about that because he's an economics finance major, and I'm thinking, you should be, utilizing your talents in that respect. But I have to take more of an appreciation for the arts.
Mm.
There's there's investment and money that can be made in the arts.
Absolutely.
Although it's something that I'm not familiar with, maybe it's worth my time to really um, learn more, be open more, and perhaps I can then be a source of encouragement in areas that him and his partner are pursuing,
Hmm.
you know, may be beneficial, in the long run. And so, I'm beginning to sort of sometimes you got to take off that daddy hat and just try to think about where it is that the opportunities are and meet folk right where they are and
Right.
move.
Right. Absolutely. I remember doing workshops years ago, and I would say, well, if somebody offered you 100 pairs of Nikes or 100 shares of stock in the Nike company, which one would you take?
Mm-hmm,
And of course, depending upon the age, I'll take the sneakers.
mm-hmm,
I'll take the stock. Okay. Um, and at one point, it was absolutely the wise thing to do is take the stock.
mm-hmm.
But today, Nike sneakers is a commodity.
Yeah,
I mean, a real commodity.
right.
I mean, they got some Nike sneakers that you can resell for $10,000 for one pair of sneakers.
Yeah,
So if
definitely.
you got 150 pairs of these sneakers, you can resell them, and you might have paid $200 or $300 or $1,000 for them, and they're selling for 15 grand, a hundred. It's the whole concept of finance has shifted in such that are different from anything that I've ever learned.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, if we're not open-minded about this, we can get left in the lurch too.
yeah, yeah.
So the connectedness is for us the challenge for me anyway. I don't know about you, but is to stay connected to the nuances of the nouveau wealth that's coming around.
And technology, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So so Chat GPT
Mm.
are my best friends. And I know that there are folk out there that are probably saying, nah, not going to use that AI, you know, but don't knock it until you try it
Mm.
because there's some good stuff that can come. It'll synthesize your information and then you can use it in the way that you choose to use it. I know there's Google and all of that, but there's something to this AI that we must not totally be asleep on.
Right. Right. No doubt about it. I have a colleague. He's in the Rotary with me, and he's been sending me these invitations for the last few months, actually, to sit in on these seminars on AI.
Mm-hmm,
Now, the stuff that he's telling me is absolutely mind-boggling.
mm-hmm,
That he says if you took a young person and said to them, say, listen, you've been failing in your grades. You're the third, you're the three grades behind your where you should be. If you come and let me help you, I will tell you that in 6 months, you'll be able to make a presentation before a Harvard graduate class and it will be received in that manner. Would you be interested?
Hmm.
I'm like, I'd be interested in that. But this is the kind of technology that's coming out of this AI. And
Yeah.
the learning tools are simply amazing. And it doesn't have to do with anything like the learning mechanisms that we've learned in the past. They're using new forms of learning that people are able to absorb and interpret and feed back in ways that were never done before. And I'm so excited about this because when I'm thinking about the work that I'm doing with the DA's office, one of my future projections is to bring this technology into that environment so that when a young man or a young woman who's looking at maybe a life of gang violence or something in that area, and I'll say, well, do you want this or do you want that? And they'll say, you mean I get this? Yeah, you can choose. And it say, okay, let me for 6 months and see what happens. Give me 6 months and see what happens. And in 6 months, their life will be completely turned around.
Hmm.
If we can do that, we can transform this entire the community in our community that's suffering the worst. We can revolutionize that entire thing.
And it's just about how do you package information,
Mm,
in a form that is easily received. And of course, there's certain fact checking that one has to do, to it.
right.
But but you know, I've asked it some questions, and it's given me like so much information, and I'm sort of like, wow, this is.
Mm,
And so, with everything, there's the pros and cons to it, but utilize it in a way that will be most um, um, instructive.
hmm
And I think that there'll be something there.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And if you have anything that you could share with me on that personally, I'll take it because I have not figured out. Um, I don't have corporate structure around me to help me to do that. But if there's anything you can share with me to help me, because it is. I think I want to use it in some instances, not always. But if I know more about it, I can make better decisions.
Okay.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And by the way, we're almost out of time. We're almost at that hour. So let me give you an opportunity, my brother, and I so appreciate your being here. You have no idea. This is the connection that I look forward to. If you would just take some moments, take some time to just share in your own way, whatever you want to share, and then the Lord has placed on my heart some closing words and meditation. I'll do that, and then we'll be done.
Well, once again, uh, Dr. Russell, so appreciative of this opportunity. And um, I think it's apropos that your message about being connected is so very important. I think it's the pathway that we all will need to go in order that we fulfill the promises that God has made over our lives. Um, my connection to you um, is not by happenstance, and I know that there will be many more opportunities in the future to be connected in so many ways, especially in the work that you're doing, around financial empowerment, and something that I'm equally interested in. And so I look towards the opportunity of remaining connected there. But, for others that are out there and listening to this broadcast, I think it's very important that we all stay connected to one another in this season, as there are so many divisive forces that are out there that are looking to separate us. But if we stay um, connected to one another, we can achieve so much more. And so I'm just grateful for this opportunity. And there'll be so much more to do, you know, in the next couple of months. I'm thinking about my own trajectory in terms of career and opportunities, and want to just remain connected to those that are out there, and to just leverage my resources and ability to just continue to be a connector of people. And so thank you for this opportunity.
Oh man, you're more than welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. It was a pleasure, and I'm just delighted that we were able to put this together today. And looking forward to some future. This is going to be more of this. Trust me, it's going to be a lot more of this because we need to do more of this. Conversation is important, so we'll do that. So, and by the way, let me just do a little background stuff here, right? The book of John is a fascinating book. You read about many of the miracles that Jesus performed, healing a nobleman's son without ever seeing the child, healing a man at the pool of Bethesda, miraculously feeding 5,000, Jesus walking on water, declaring himself to be the bread of heaven, hearing his own brothers when they disbelieved him to be the Messiah, the raising of Lazarus from the grave, Jesus washing his disciples' feet, him declaring himself to be the way, the truth, and the life. And in chapter 15, Jesus says, I am the vine, a parallel of himself as the vine and us as the branches. God is the Father looking for Christ likeness in the branches so that he can make them productive, make us productive. But all of it is about staying connected. Whenever anyone disconnects from the vine, their ability to bear fruit ends immediately. I'm sure they will still do good things. They can still do good things, but they will not be able to bear the fruit Jesus talks about when they are not connected to the vine. They have not lost their salvation or their ticket to glory, but they have lost their effectiveness. The vine has also been guilty, or excuse me, let me put it this way. The vine has never been guilty of disconnecting from the branch. It's always the branch that chooses to disconnect from the vine. They have chosen to disconnect from the vine, which renders them fruitless. The Bible says such branches are gathered up and thrown into the fire and are burned up. Just as the vine nourishes the branches, Christ nourishes those who are connected to him. So, in a nutshell, all we're saying and all we've been talking about tonight is whatever you decide to do, make sure you decide to stay connected. My friend and my guest, Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond, has shared with us some of the benefits his staying connected has had throughout our community, locally and nationally. It's not just in the church, but it's in the work. He has shown us in specific ways how he has been a blooming rose everywhere the Lord has planted him because he stays connected to the vine. My brother, your presence tonight is a validation of this ministry's quest to likewise stay connected. I'm trying to stay connected with you and others that I have developed relationships with. And I appreciate the time that you took out of your busy schedule, particularly after just coming back from a seminar or function over the weekend to be with the Matters of Faith family tonight. I really do appreciate that. And I thank you so much. Do you know the last time you were on our show was November 21st, 2022?
Wow, it was that long ago.
And
Okay.
the topic was setting the standard for faithfulness.
Wow.
Make no mistake, my brother, you still are setting the standard. So
Appreciate
faithfulness, you've been doing that. And thank you for your ministry, my brother, because you really do make a difference. And I appreciate that.
it.
Now,
Thank
do
you.
me a favor, right?
Uh,
Plan on coming back, but
yeah,
not 2.5 years from now. Okay. Let's not do that. So look at your calendar. You give me a date and we'll make it happen. Okay.
sounds,
That way I don't have to be calling at the last minute. We'll set it up and I won't know the topic, but it won't matter
yeah,
because it'll always be something that the Lord has placed in your heart. And it'll be just like today, it will be what the Lord has said that we needed to do. All right.
yeah. Sounds good.
Now,
Sounds
please don't forget our sponsors and advertisers. It's very important that you do that. Okay. Don't forget our sponsors and our advertisers. The JLR Company, JLR Consulting LLC, those are my companies for all your church financial needs. All you got to do is make a telephone call, 718-757-1565. Let me do that again. That's my cell number, 757-1527 or 718-328-8096. That's my office number, 718-328-8096. If you call that number, we'll respond. Or you can send me an email at jlorenr@jlr.llc. That's jlaurenr@jlr.llc. And remember, it's not about the castle, it's about the kingdom. Matters of Faith, the book, and my Cash App, $ Matters of Faith. The book is $24.15, which covers shipping and handling, or you can get it as an ebook. Ebook is at smashwords.com. Sorry, folks, it's not on Amazon. You have to get it as Smashwords, but when you order it, it will be right there immediately. There's no shipping and no handling. The book is $20. Better Mag Magazine, www.abettermag.com. That's www.abettermag.com. To subscribe, a 2-year subscription is only $27.50. They publish quarterly, and they cover and they carry my column in their magazine. So please, man, please, sir, support them in their efforts. We appreciate that. John J. Fox and Sons Incorporated Funeral Services, professional, compassionate, and family-friendly, proudly serving the Bronx community for 125 years. You want professionalism? You want compassion? You want a family-friendly service? Give them a call, 718-733-9114. John J. Fox and Sons Incorporated Funeral Services. Now, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the Matters of Faith YouTube channel. That's Matters of Faith YouTube channel. Just all you have to do is just push like and share it. That's it. That's all you have to do. But in order for us to become a viral broadcast, we need you to subscribe, like, and share our YouTube channel. Now, on behalf of my guest, Reverend Dr. Lawrence G. Hammond, and myself, we want you to know, and we want you to remember to stay connected. Just stay connected. Please stay connected. Only the Lord knows what he will be able to do and what he will do through you and with you when you are connected. That's his choice, but he knows what it is. And remember to join us next Monday night at the same time and the same place. If no one has told you this today, I want to be the first to say that I love you and there's absolutely nothing that you can do about it. So get used to it. Now, the Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So to my brothers and my sisters, on behalf of my guest and myself, God bless you. And truly, we wish you a good night.